Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District to order. And the first order of business is setting of the meeting agenda. Are there any changes or additions? If not, a motion to accept the agenda.
I'll move to accept.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Motion and second. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Roll call vote. Bobby?
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Oknick,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Loth.
Aye.
It's unanimous and the agenda has been set. Next item is the public hearing on our 2022 draft budget. And I think I'll turn it to you, Michael, and then probably Emily will be involved in this as well.
Madam Chair, I don't know if we need to actually announce that we're opening the hearing. Is that council? Is that accurate? Or do we just?
Yes, yes, that's fine. We're fine.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Madam Chair, managers, staff has prepared a synopsis of the 2022 budget and the summary financials that will go along with that. And I'll let Emily proceed with that presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So managers, we've got a presentation here. It's kind of similar to last year's, but just want to go through some budget overview, a few program highlights and project highlights. So with that, next slide, please, Bobby. So just to kind of review the budgeting process, and especially for the newer managers, we kind of start in the spring, and in May, we develop a schedule that determines at what board meetings we're going to be discussing the budget, and kind of over the summer, discussing it at those meetings. And then we held some additional work group meetings with the budget work group. That's Manager Anderson, Manager Schmaltz, Administrator Kinney, and myself. And then kind of getting through in the summer months, finalizing that budget. And then by September, we want to approve it and then certify it. The deadline is, it used to be September 15th. It's now September 30th, but we're kind of still treating it as September 15th, just to make sure we are on track and don't want to run up to that deadline. That's definitely not something we want to do. And then in December, a thing that we're required to do is open it up for additional public comment at the regular board meeting. And so there will be another opportunity at that point as well. Thank you. So this year, the proposed expense budget that you have in the packet to consider tonight is $4.1 million. That's a 25% increase compared to last year. And that budget would be funded by a levy, which the board is proposing to increase by 10% compared to last year. And that kind of goes with a 7 to 9% median tax impact increase. It's different depending on the county. And so what that means is, as it impacts your median home in either county, that impact that people see on their statement, it's going to be 7 or 9% higher than it was last year. And then there was also some amount of Clean Water Partnership loan. We have about a $60,000 balance on our current loan, but we can probably close that out and then apply for a new loan even yet this year and get that next loan. And we've got a general obligation note up to $5 million. And so our first loan was 1.5 million. So that means we could get another 3.5 million pretty easily, just to make it simple. And so then that means that grants and other revenues kind of make up that balance, and that's 1.6 million as well. And those are kind of the three main legs of funding the budget. And if managers have questions or comments or anything, feel free to chime in at any point in the presentation. So this kind of page full of numbers, really the thing that we try to look at is there's all these numbers, but how do they increase year by year? And so if you kind of look at that, the column that is the levy over estimated market value, it's kind of the third in from the right. Yes, thank you with the cursor. You'll kind of see that that's, you know, our estimated market value is a really big number. And so the levy is a very small percentage of that. And you can kind of see how it increased incrementally over time. And then same over the net tax capacity. They're kind of very similar numbers, but the net tax capacity is smaller. And then kind of the definitions of some of those things up top there. But then there's more information on that in the info sheet. But if there's no questions, we can move on from those numbers.
The only point that I'd like to make is that 2022, because we don't have all of the information there, for the public, I would like to see that line taken out entirely. It's, I think, misleading without having all of the other data present.
We can do that and repost that info sheet and the presentation here.
Mhm.
The only question I have on that, Manager Anderson, is that people are gonna tune in to find out what the budget is for 2022. So even though there may be some shortcomings, maybe we could explain that if the questions come up. Otherwise, I know it looks like it may be higher than it's actually gonna be after everything comes in. And maybe we could just make that as a point of reference later on. But if there's no information on 2022 and people dial in to find out about 2022, they may be a little disappointed.
Well, I think it's impossible to have data on 2022. We haven't done a budget. We don't know what those variables are in estimated market value and tax capacity. So if it's a standoff here, then I think we need to have the board weigh in on that. I just don't think it's worth putting it in. You're going to invite questions that you don't have answers to. So how does the rest of the board feel about this?
Well, we're already talking about a 7% to 9% impact. We're talking about the 10% increase over the 2021 levy.
Mhm.
So we're referencing what we're going to be doing. We just don't have the data to say it's specifically this is how it happens.
Mhm.
So it's kind of those crazy situations where we kind of have to say what we're going to do, but we don't have the actual data to say this is why we're doing it on these numbers.
Right, but that's our plan now for the budget in it's actually the
Correct.
2023 budget. So I just think it's too far out. I mean, things can change and it's not helpful for anyone.
Would a footnote be helpful in there to clarify that?
What, to say that this is a guesstimate? And we don't know really what our 2023 budget is going to be?
Or we're not talking about the 2023 budget. We're talking about the 2022 budget.
No, this is we're planning for 2023 and 2022. Because the budget we're doing right now that we're talking about is the 2022 budget. We're done with 2021 practically. You're always planning the year ahead.
But we know the levy is going to be 1.6 million. And based upon the estimated market value, it's 0.07, and based upon the net levy tax capacity, it's 7%. And we know if we come in at 1.475 in 2021, it's going to be 10% increase. So as a taxpayer, I guess I can be upset with that, or else I can be thankful it's not 20 or 25% increase. So I don't know. I mean, how much of a risk are we taking by showing that? I think we're taking more of a risk by not showing it, and people are wondering what's really going to happen to us. Maybe Mike, you can maybe comment on this since you've got even more experience than we do. So,
Well, the only I mean, caveat is that I understand the principle or the idea that Manager Anderson is trying to work through here. And because, right, I mean, we have the known data for 2021, which we're in now in terms of net tax capacity. But maybe the other thing in terms of the optics is that not necessarily within this graph, but in another one, it might be important to either add to this graph or somewhere in that PowerPoint that because the 10% certainly sounds like a large volume, a large percentage, which it is, just in and of itself, but the actual impact is for the medium home value is under $20. So the per 100,000, it's about somewhere between $6 and $7. So within the context of way citizens would view tax impacts, that would perhaps then change some of the concerns that the managers have with respect to the way the numbers are being portrayed. So, and I think either we add some of that information for clarification, or we do add a note. But I guess from my standpoint, either is fine. We can just make sure that we add some either clarifying statements, or there certainly is enough information about the budget data already, and through the entire budget development process, which has been months in the making. I mean, we, as Emily noted, we start the process in May. So it's not like we're at all trying to do anything behind closed doors. In fact, we're often complimented by Washington County board members about our transparency. So I guess I'm not overly concerned about having it in there or taking it out. We will be able to address any questions the citizens will have.
Well, then it's up to, we've got two people for, so that leaves Jen and Chris to weigh in. You want it in or out? Really, it's that simple.
Based on what Mike just said, I would lean towards keeping it in, but that's a very slight lean towards that direction.
Okay, Jen?
I will go with whatever the majority goes with. I'm sorry, I had a lot of background noise there.
Okay, I think we have it, so we'll leave it in.
Do we want to add some footnotes as Mike suggested so that there's a little?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
I think that would be a good compromise because that does kind of allay some of the concerns you have, Jackie.
Yeah, the thing is, it's hard to keep that in mind, but you're always using the prior year's information for the current year's budget that you're working on. And so it gets confusing, and that's why, these are unknowns right now, but who knows? I mean, we could go through a algorithm looking at what the average increase in the estimated market value has been. So we can highlight it that way, and the net tax capacity the same way. So you at least get closer to a number. And that's what we do when we go through the budget process, because we don't have that information when we're starting out the budget process in May. So as long as it's highlighted that those are estimates only.
So what you're suggesting is we replace the TBD, the two numbers, with a number that's bracket E estimated.
Yes.
I think that makes a good compromise.
Is there a number that's, we could say is projected?
Or projected, same thing.
Yep, same thing.
Yeah. It's what we expect the market value to go up based on the last, let's say, 5 years average.
Yeah, I share your goal with trying to be as accurate and as clear as we possibly can. So by putting an estimate in there, that's our best estimate. So that's, I think that makes a lot of good sense.
And it can always change, and that should be in the
Right.
footnotes as well, is that
Right.
this is where we are today. By the time we start budgeting mid-year next year, things could be different.
Yeah, the way things are going, it's probably going to be conservative because things are going up pretty fast right now.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll
So
make
can we
that,
have CF make that or Emily make that estimate then? Based upon
Well-
whatever we have is,
well, I think what she should do is work on that and then send it to the work group so that we can
Okay.
review it. And then we'll finalize it that way, if that's okay with the board. And then we'll just move on from there. Is that good with the board?
I'm okay with that.
I'm good with that.
Okay, Chris,
Yes, I am good with that.
Jen?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. Move on. Thank you.
Okay, so the next slide is just, again, you can't really read it, but just to kind of highlight, here's the first budget overview page. And so just the high level categories that we have. And so the three that were original came from the watershed management plan. There's 1,000 administration, 3,000 programs, and 5,000 projects. New this year, since 2022 will be the first year that we are actually going to be repaying our Clean Water Partnership loan. We've been getting disbursements the past 4 years, and now we have to pay it back over the course of 10 years. And so we've set up this new debt services fund. And so all of the payments that go out to repay that loan will be in that category. And I think more on that a little bit more later too. So here's just a summary of the various expenses and revenues. And so this is kind of the outcome of several budget work group meetings. And so obviously our budgeted expenses are on the left, that 4.1 million, there's the four categories now. And then revenues, those went through a few iterations with the budget work groups. You've got kind of the levy right there. Based on kind of projections out into the next, 7 years, the work group went through a few different scenarios of what the loan could possibly be. And so that's a number right there of 1.6 million for getting a new loan. Doing our best estimate for grant revenue. And so we know that we've got certain grants awarded. The kind of unknown and the things that make it estimates are what is actually going to be that earned revenue. And so this is something that in the past we've figured out for our audit, of course, but we haven't done projections on it. We've always just shown what's that gross grant revenue? Because for a lot of our grants, you'll just get a big chunk payment, 50% of that grant right up front. And maybe you only spend 25% of it in that first year, but you still have that big first payment sitting in the bank. But the piece that you spend that might be a smaller amount, that's actually your earned grant revenue. And so in the audit, it doesn't show up as revenue until you actually spend it. So that is kind of what we're trying to do with this number is how much grant funds do we think we'll spend in 2022? And so that number could change. It could be higher or lower, but again, that's just an estimate to kind of help us get an idea. And then that other, that's that kind of small sliver at the top. It's very important because it's our partners too. We partner with lake associations, cities, and organizations like that to try to leverage more dollars for AIS, things like that. And then also our permit program. If someone needs to get a permit, they pay a deposit. And so that pays for the expenses the district incurs associated with overseeing that permit. And then a small amount from interest income in the bank. So the next slide. Thank you. So kind of moving away from the numbers onto just a highlight of programs and projects. And so we're kind of in this transitional point because, at our next meeting, we'll have a recommended motion to adopt the new 10-year plan. And so we're kind of on the tail end of this phase of making those water quality improvements in our lakes. And so that's been kind of the district's primary goal, and probably for the next 5 years or so, it still will be, but we're transitioning into this phase of now looking at different kind of goals, acres of wetland restored, volume of stormwater capacity, things like that, to sort of build that capacity to protect our water resources and maintain those good conditions in the long term in the face of climate change, increasing development, things like that. So that'll really be a capacity building. Next slide, please. And so we've got the programs and then the projects. So the projects are kind of generally those really large impacts on water quality. You see those direct effects, we can model them, we can measure them by taking samples on the ground. Some examples are kind of wetland restorations, stormwater treatment, agricultural practices, things like that. So here's just a few. We've got the Bigsby Park, the Moody Lake, and the Shields Lake projects highlighted there. Some kind of big projects that you can see some examples. The next slide talks about programs. And so those are kind of like our baseline activities. And so they might have a direct impact on water quality. They might be more indirect, but still sort of that capacity building and how do we have a resilient system to stand up to changes and negative kind of things that might happen to it. And so just a few examples. I'll go into more detail of the programs in a moment, but you've got like education, development regulations, the permitting program, residential cost share, aquatic invasive species, and monitoring and kind of building our knowledge base through studies and whatnot. Next slide, please. So, yep, that's just so getting into the programs. So here's kind of the list of all the district programs that we have in the watershed management plan and in the budget. Next slide, please. I'm just going to give a few highlights of just a few of them. So permitting, that's a really active permit. We've been seeing a general increasing trend in development. I think Metropolitan Council estimated that this I-35 corridor, especially Forest Lake and that sort of area, will be increasing in population and development in the next few years. You can kind of see a little bit on this bar graph. That's just the number of active permits, number of permits issued and everything. You can kind of just see it increasing in more recent years. Next slide. The monitoring program, that's been kind of a steady program that the district has done for years. And in recent, just in 2020, we've taken that program more in-house. And instead of hiring it out to the Washington Conservation District, we've still hired out some of the work to our district engineer, EOR, but district staff, having increased staff capacity, has enabled our own in-house staff to get out in the field and be taking samples and working with volunteers as well. So that's Blaine in those two pictures there doing some stream monitoring. And so we also have just kind of the difference between, we've got this ongoing monitoring of these legacy sites, doing in-lake monitoring. We work with volunteers for that. We do project effectiveness monitoring to actually show with real data, are the projects we're putting in the ground working? And then diagnostic monitoring, which kind of tells us, all right, where is the next project that we need to do? More than just, looking at fields and doing a desktop analysis, actually having on the ground monitoring data has enabled the district to be really successful in getting these big projects. And then the DIY monitoring is something that we've been doing more and more. And we've got a new citizen assisted tributary monitoring program. And that's using kind of this equipment that you're seeing in the middle photo here to actually analyze those samples ourselves. And it's more cost effective. Next slide, please. Our education and outreach program is another one that's just been increasing year after year. Again, having that additional staff capacity has been really big to do some things that are more tailored to the watershed district. In the past, the district's worked with East Metro Water Resource Education Program, or MREP, And they do a really great job of kind of covering a really wide area and putting out, very general education outreach pieces, but not as much focused directly on our area and what the watershed district is doing. And so that's kind of a goal of ours, is to do more and more with in-house staff. So it takes the form of a lot of different things: local student engagement, a big online presence, holding these events like the district tour and state of the watershed. And then other kind of programs holding workshops like the turf talks with Jack McKenzie and storm drain stenciling, which you see pictured there. This Saturday we have, in a couple days, watershed cleanup event at noon, I believe, or maybe 10 to noon. I should know this, but this Saturday, a watershed cleanup event in Lakeside Park. Bobby, you can, if you know the start time, feel free to drop it in the chat, or okay, I'll look it up after this. That's just a few things in the education outreach program. Next slide, please. Just two highlights of kind of the bigger ticket items in these other programs: technical resource sharing and research. We're kind of at the tail end of completing a big update of our hydrologic and hydraulic model. We're actually just a few meetings ago did a good presentation on kind of what all that means and what goes into the modeling and why we do modeling. And so this is a big thing that EOR does for us. And then the Lake Deep Sediment Cores, working with the St. Croix Watershed Research Station. They've got students, you can see pictured here, taking samples from the lakes, literally a deep core sediment sample from the lake, to look at the history of the lake and kind of understand how it's changed over time. What was its natural state? And is it possible to get back? What state can we get it back to, really? Next slide, please. Then our AIS prevention and management program is another big one that's been pretty consistent through the years. Kind of that prevention element of having watercraft inspections, hiring our own watercraft inspectors, and also having a joint program with Chisago County to have inspectors out there at the launches. Performing various surveys. We work with Blue Water Science on a lot of those, but also staff like Garrett and others have been getting out and doing some surveys themselves. And then just management of those various invasive species out there. Curly leaf pondweed's been a big one over the years, flowering rush. We've been getting into even more purple loosestrife, and I think Garrett did a hydrilla, I think it was, but a few different other species, and then also carp management. Yeah, I think that kind of covers that. And then the last one that I wanted to highlight was kind of this land acquisition and management. We've had that in the project section. Now we're moving it to programs. And one of the things that it'll really tie in with is this kind of Greenway Corridor initiative that we've been talking about. How do we identify and then protect key areas, and working with stakeholders, working with the cities, and kind of having that forethought of years down the road. What are these natural spaces? Once everything kind of development comes in, what are the natural spaces that we really want to protect? Kind of like how they protected that Central Park in New York City. You kind of have to plan ahead for that. So maybe not quite the same, but a similar idea. Next slide, please. And then we'll talk about water quality projects. So just kind of on the whole, projects, there's two different kinds of things we're trying to reach. There's state standards, and then there's these long-term sustainable district goals, which in some cases are the same as state standards. In some cases, they go a little bit beyond. So back when we first started, we needed to reduce maybe about 3,000 pounds of phosphorus per year to meet these goals. So far, we've achieved about 89% of that. And then at the bottom, you can kind of see that sustainable goal. And if you switch to the next slide, more on that. So like I said, sometimes those goals go a little bit further than state standards. So that we needed to reduce 5,000 pounds per year of phosphorus to reach that goal, or about 81% of the way toward achieving those. And we're seeing it in our lakes as well. Putting projects in the ground, having those programs, keeping just kind of accounting track of all of those. And you can really see that lakes, sometimes it's a big shift, like Moody Lake and Shields Lake. We put in these big projects and did the alum treatments, and you can start to see improvements right away. But there's still that remaining load of about 1,000 pounds per year, which we have in our plan to achieve by the expiration of our next plan, that 2031. Next slide, please. So here's those numbers just kind of visualized of, we're really close to being able to meet those goals and those state standards. And so, like I said at the beginning, we got to get that little rest of the way there. And then the key will be keeping it at that place. Maintaining those projects, building capacity, making sure that this system can hold up to changes. Next slide. And so kind of the last thing I want to talk about is just highlighting a few projects, like what is left in these 4 lake management districts that we have. And so of course there's Bone, Forest, Little Comfort, and Comfort, and that's, our budget is color coded, and our plan is kind of categorized out according to those lake management districts. Next slide, please. So for Bone Lake, really to kind of meet that remaining goal to keep Moody and Bone Lakes at their goals, we've got these 3 projects identified. So agricultural practices and capstone projects, like there's a few just practices around Moody Lake to really get just as small. And, on the whole, Moody Lake needed a very large reduction in phosphorus in order to meet its goals. So this remaining 76 pounds, it's almost, you could say, within a margin of error, but we still think there's a little bit left that we could do in order to make sure that Moody Lake keeps its good water quality that we're seeing right now. And then same for Bone Lake. We've got this Northeast Legacy wetland restoration right there that's hopefully going in this upcoming winter. And then a few more targeted agricultural practices that we want to do around. But again, kind of like that chart showed, we're really in that last little, 20% toward meeting these goals. And so sometimes those are a little bit harder to meet, those last few non-point sources, rather than that first big chunk of addressing the major issue that's there. Next slide, please. For Forest Lake, kind of what's on our short list is this ongoing County Road 50 iron enhanced sand filter project that we've got the grant for. There's still a few like direct drainage, like right around Forest Lake, some projects that we've identified that we need to do. Also, we just applied for a grant for a wetland restoration, also in the JD6 subwatershed. And then this winter, really kind of using monitoring data from this year, and then doing some further analysis to decide really if Forest Lake needs an alum treatment. We've done alum treatments on Moody Lake and Shields Lake, and we're proposing one on Little Comfort Lake next. So we need to decide if it's right for Forest Lake and exactly where it would be.
Emily, could you just point to the JD6 area so people know what you're talking about?
Sure, it's where F1 and F3 are, down just below Forest East. You can't really see it like the channel itself on there, but basically connects those two and then goes up and hits Forest East at that south end.
And JD stands for?
Judicial Ditch. Thank you. All right. In the Little Comfort Lake Management District, and so really kind of starting up, so this is where Bone Lake outlets, it goes through a tributary stream through Birch School and then to Little Comfort Lake, and then of course Little Comfort has its connection to Big Comfort Lake. There might be some agricultural or horse paddock work that we want to do near Birch Lake. I'm still kind of figuring out the details on that. We've got a feedlot project just north of School Lake identified. And then kind of these 3 projects that we had as part of a recent Clean Water Fund award was a channel restoration at the outlet of School Lake, the east wetland impoundment just upstream of Little Comfort Lake, and then, like I mentioned, that alum treatment in Little Comfort Lake. And all of those will really have a big impact on not just Little Comfort Lake, but Comfort Lake as well. And then kind of seeing where we're at that point, if there's any further projects that need to be done, livestock management, that we're aware of a few other issues in the area, but it's to be determined if something will need to be done about those. And then finally, Comfort Lake. So noting those Little Comfort Lake projects that are right there, because that'll really make up a big improvement to Comfort Lake. We've got that tax forfeit wetland restoration project, which is another big one. And then kind of the remaining projects, we think that those 2 projects will really be the phosphorus reduction needed to get Comfort Lake to its long-term goals. And so now it's kind of, but still looking at what more can we do to look at other issue areas, like such as sediment, total suspended solids, and stormwater volume. So looking at that shallow pond area and maybe some urban retrofits, putting some kind of stormwater treatment in that Forest Lake urbanized area around like Home Depot and Cub Foods and Menards, those big box stores. Next slide, please. And then that's really kind of highlighting what we need to do for the lakes, but then also a few big ticket items that we have in the budget is that information gathering for the next phase of work. So a comprehensive wetland inventory across the district, natural resources inventory and prioritization, and then a groundwater dependent natural resource inventory and review. And so just the map here is just a few layers that we have on our interactive web map of kind of native plant communities connected with groundwater, other native plant communities, the National Wetland Inventory. So you can see there's we have a ton of wetlands and a lot of kind of natural features throughout the district that are beyond just what the lakes are. So studying those more in depth. And of course, kind of the thing that we always come back to is, this is a cycle of using this adaptive management to always be evaluating our progress and course correcting if we need to. So kind of that design strategy of, okay, what are we going to do? Implementing it, doing actual monitoring, that project effectiveness monitoring, analyzing and evaluating, okay, where does this leave us? And assessing that progress, and then, okay, so then what's the next step in order to make sure we're getting to where we want to go? Next slide, please. Yeah, and then again, just kind of noting, I'll open it up to questions now in the actual public hearing here, and then there will be another opportunity in December to make comments.
Okay. Is there anyone in the public that would like to, that's present, that would like to address the board? I don't think we have any members of the public present. So I'm going to close the public hearing.
Just, Manager Anderson, I have one
Yes.
suggestion.
Mhm.
I think it's an excellent presentation. If we have to give it again later on in December, et cetera, we may want to have a backup chart which shows all the stuff that we've done. In other words, we've talked all about where we've come, but we haven't shown any documentation of how we got there. And then most importantly, we've shown a very good direction of what we're going to do in the future, which is very important. But somebody may ask, well, how do you know, how did you get those, 3,800 pounds out of 4,200 pounds? So if you just had a chart showing the projects we did and how much was reduced by the lake area on one slide or two slides, just as the backup in case somebody asks that question, as a suggestion.
Yeah, I thought it was very, very good. I figured out what the problem was on that chart, after we left that discussion for the taxes. And we can talk about it afterwards. It's just shifting those numbers down because the tax market value, the taxes are always a year behind. So we just need to shift all that that first column down. But I'll talk to you about it afterwards so that it's clear to you, Emily, but the information's there. We just have to align it. I thought it was very good. I thought you did a good job of showing the projects, some of the major projects that we've done that have had huge impacts. But like Steve said, it's, you know, it's good at a public hearing to always have the entire detail. So that would be pretty easy to do by Lake Management District. And people are going to gravitate toward that information that is around the area where they live. So it would be nice to have it presented in that fashion. We also have, of course, our annual reports that go over time and detail all of that. But to have a category list or a list by category, I mean by Lake Management District, and then by year, you know, also have it by year so that we can see the chronology. And present.
Again, I
the
don't think we have to
chronology.
show that data. I think we just have to have it in case somebody
list.
questions how do we get those numbers, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think it's a great presentation the way it is, and you don't want to encumber the public with more 5 or 6 more slides. Just have it in case somebody asks the question, here's how we got there, so they know.
I was speaking to your list concept, but just doing it by Lake Management District.
Right, okay.
And have it by chronologically by year so that people could see what's been taking place over the 20 years of the district. So I agree with that. Any other comments from the board? Okay, then we need to move back to our agenda. And our first item is a motion. If you can pull that up. First item is a motion to adopt the resolution.
Madam Chair,
Or do I have that backwards? I have that backwards. I'm sorry. We do the resolution first. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I
Chuck?
believe that the hearing is closed and now you have new business with Bone Lake, and then you'll go back to the budget and levy.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Okay, so the public hearing is closed and we move on now to new business, Bone Lake Northeast Wetland Contract Award.
Madam Chair, managers, we have from EOR, Kyle Crawford and Cecilia Olivier, along with Blaine Eineker from our own staff. They've been working to coordinate the project implementation since the awarding of this grant this last year. This has been, again, a process of data analysis, aerial photography review, interviews with local citizens that led us to identify this project based on actual field data, something otherwise that the sub-watershed analysis that was previously done was unable to identify for the district. I'll let Kyle and Blaine work through the award here piece. Thank you.
Blaine, do you want to start or do you want me to?
I can just provide a little bit of background. So this project area is located at the northeast corner of Bone Lake. It's a large wetland complex that flows directly into Bone Lake. Back in the 1950s, 1960s, there was a dairy that operated adjacent to the wetland. Their land management practices allowed cattle and manure runoff from the farm area to go directly into the wetland. As Mike mentioned, we were looking at aerial photography and talking with local citizens. They pointed us to the presence of this ag operation on the landscape. We did some soil cores within the wetland that identified high levels of remnant manure in the soils. So we applied for the Clean Water Fund grant and were awarded some funds to go in, restore the area, remove some of those legacy sediments, manure-laden sediments. And this should restore the area, improve water quality for the wetland, and then downstream in Bone Lake. And it's estimated that this project will remove anywhere from around 15 to 25 pounds of phosphorus per year from entering into Bone Lake. Kyle, if you'd like to take off from there, let's talk about the contractor and pre-bid process and whatnot.
Yeah, thank you, Blaine, for the intro. So yeah, in mid-August, we posted this for public bidding for local contractors. And our bid opening bids were due just over a week ago on September 1st. As you can see there on the EOR memo, we received 8 bids. One of those bids was actually, after further review, was deemed to be not responsive. They were missing a few bid documents. Fortunately, they were not in contention for the low bid for that. So after review, Kevitt Excavating was our low bid, and they did provide all the required bid documentation and project experience documentation. EOR has worked with Kevitt Excavating in the past, and we have had positive experiences. In addition, we did contact some project references that they had provided, and I was able to talk through some of their contacts on previous projects and got nothing but positive reviews from them. So with that in mind, you know, the total bid price is quite a bit lower than our engineer's estimate. That was part of the reason we did want to bid this out fairly early. It is winter work, but we did want to get a bid out before other winter work starts coming out so we could get a lot of competitive bids, which, as you can see on the memo there, we fortunately did. So with that, we are recommending award of the project to Kevitt Excavating. And I'll open up for questions from any board members.
Madam Chair, just for the board, we note in the motion there, the recommended motion or the action, that there's a 15% contingency. While this is maybe higher than normal, we still have plenty of room within the budget and also within the grant award amount. So this was intentional because we've had 2 similar projects, large projects, wetland remediation projects of this type in the past. One was Dixie Park and the other one was up north of Moody Lake off of 250th. And in both of those cases, the winter work ended up with some warm weather that could have been really detrimental to the conclusion of the project in a timely fashion. So by allowing the additional dollar amount, and if there's any need for me to act on behalf of the board with respect to the contract, we can do so in a timely manner without having to necessarily call an emergency meeting. But I would, of course, still keep the board president informed of any such activity.
Any comments? Any questions from the board?
Looks good.
I thought that 15% contingency made a lot of sense in this scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just noticed that on page 1, the 161 is a little bit higher, but by about $1,000, $1,050 or so, higher than what 15% is of the 139,113. I think the motion covers us because or excuse me, the resolution covers us because it doesn't give a number. But EOR just might want to look at that memo, or if Mike wants to make a notation for the record that's just a little bit off, we can do so. But any other questions or comments of the engineers or of Mike on the project? Then I just have a question for Chuck. Chuck, we do the recommended motion first and then the resolution, correct?
Madam Chair, the recommended motion would be to adopt the resolution. So it would just be one action.
Okay,
I'd like to move to adopt the resolution, but I can't see the number of it. I'm sorry, on my screen. 210901.
I will second that.
okay. Roll call vote is in order.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Oknick,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Lowe.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Thank you. Next, moving on to old business. Now the board revisits the 2022 budget for action, either further discussion or action.
I think we've discussed this a number of times. I think we should just move ahead, and I'll move to adopt the resolution 210902.
I'll second.
Okay, is there any further discussion or questions? All right, roll call vote, please. Bobby?
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Oknick,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Lowe.
Manager Lowe?
Aye.
Okay. All right, the resolution is adopted. Thank you. Next item, watershed management plan update.
And chairs, managers, I guess really the last step on this very lengthy process, which our planning coordinator, Emily Hines, has very excellently led the district through for the last roughly 2.5 years. It was approved, but we're looking to proceed with the adoption of the plan at the next meeting. So I don't know if there's anything else, Emily, that you want to add at this point.
Just that quick update that, Bowser has approved it and we're getting all the documentation together, and it'll be in this next board packet for adoption kind of nicely on our 22nd anniversary. We'll adopt the new plan.
Great job, Emily, and the whole team that contributed.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful. It's a big, big project. I wasn't even working on it. I'm tired.
I just wanted to ask if there were any comments from the staff or the board or the people at Bowser. Did we get any comments?
On
No. Okay.
nothing other than, I think, just congratulations. I think that it was a very, very short piece of their agenda for their meeting there down in Lee.
Yeah, the comments I suppose were at the regional meeting. Okay,
Correct.
very good. Thank you. Next item is the Comfort Lake Association Community Grant Application.
Managers wanted just to bring this back up for the discussion. District has discussed this several times over the last 6-7 months or so. And we're still working through certainly at the staff and board level what this kind of both the community grant program or AIS efforts and in general our partnerships with our lake associations, what those would all entail. And but at present we have a request from the Comfort Lake Association to address Eurasian wild milfoil treatment. And my understanding is that the request has actually been reduced, and I think Manager Anderson has some information from the Lake Association, recognizing that there was some, that that 10,342 was the total dollar amount, and that's not actually their full request, but rather a reduced number somewhere 8,000 minus some contribution based of time and such.
Right. If this was a two-phase project, and so the first phase was completed already with the DNR, gave a small grant for that first treatment. And so this is for the Procellacor treatment, this new one that is treating the hybrid. It's the only one licensed herbicide for hybrid Eurasia milfoil, and it is to be done before the end of September. So it's done later in the summer than the first one. And if you look at the last page of the grant, this really lays it out. This is really for the second portion. It may not be the last page. These aren't numbered, so it's hard. The project budget, that would be on page C. Or item C, if you go that way.
Page 7 of 8. Yep.
Yeah. And that amount on the top, the 7,381, is actually the amount. As you see, in a grant situation, there is that labor component, and typically that goes toward the match. So that would not be included. And the, as I understand it, Mike has laid out here a way to do this outside of the grant by using the extra AIS monies that are available. And that's explained in his memo. So this is a way to accommodate this situation until we get the Lake Association grant program completed. And Mike and I will work on that. This was talked about at a prior meeting a couple of months ago. And he and I will be working on getting that language and the application process streamlined. So the I think Mike's recommending here the second motion, the most appropriate one, and replacing that 10,342 with the 7,381.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Holtman.
may I also suggest you consider as part of that motion that you authorize the administrator to place reasonable documentation requirements on that, not to create a lot of paperwork, but to just give him the ability to make sure that the work is done properly before the money is paid over.
Yes, I think that's appropriate. This is being done by a licensed contractor, applicator, and so there will be documentation, obviously, from that source.
Madam Chair, managers, we
Mhm.
presently have in hand the documentation required to complete the treatment process, both the delineation, the certificate, the license information, basically the same information that we would have in hand to conduct a treatment on for any other invasive species on any other lake within the district.
Right. Well, I'm going to make the motion, the second motion, to approve payment of 7,381 to the Comfort Lake Association for a second treatment of Eurasia milfoil to be completed by September 30th for the acreage delineated in the DNR permit issued to the CLA and attached in the grant application, and to also require that appropriate documentation be provided to the administrator before payment is made.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
You know, I support the concept entirely. The only question I have is the timing. You know, we're at the end of the season, and Eurasian water milfoil will be dying off. In fact, it's probably already started to die off now already. So are we really gaining any benefit by treating it this late in the season? Or are we better off trying to get it next spring when it first pops up? Because all the spreading has already occurred because people have, run through it and chopped off pieces and it's floated all over the lake. But I guess we could kill what's in place, but does anybody have any understanding of how that works? Mike or Garrett?
I could investigate the timeline and see if there would be a, recommended treatment timeline, or when it gets to the point as noted that maybe it's not a really good return on investment.
If
Yeah,
I
maybe we
could
could,
just,
we
if I
could
could-
ask maybe Steve McComas and then see, because $7,000 is not a lot of money. We've got a lot of extra money in the AIS budget, so we're not even really gonna miss this money, but I would hate to see it to go to waste is all I'm saying. That's all. We're
If-
maybe
if
better
I-
off to use.
if I could jump in here with some comments. I was just out on the lake this morning and went around the lake and was trying to distinguish between Eurasian and the hybrid. And there's more hybrid than we have, the regular Eurasian milfoil, but it is robust, it is healthy, and it's right now, it looks like it is sprouting seed pods to reseed itself. So I think this is the perfect time to do it. And the date for the treatment is Monday. So it's not the end, it has to be done before the end of the month, according to the DNR permit, but it's actually scheduled to be done on Monday. And I forget, I think it's Lakes Management that is going to be doing it. So they're a licensed, well-known contractor with herbicides. But the other thing I think that is important is that this Procelicor is a very low toxic herbicide, and it is will be one of the first to have used it. And I think it's good for us to see how effective it is for our other lakes. It's supposed to have a 3-year kill life, so it's not an annual thing like we've been dealing with in the past. And it's also very targeted for the milfoil plant and the hybrid plant in particular. So I think it's worth going forward. We've had a different type of summer. We're still in summer. It's not technically fall, until the 23rd, I think. So I think we're still in that period of summer where in this year in particular, where things are still growing.
Manager Anderson, that's very helpful information. This is the first I'd heard about a hybrid. Is there any information that we can get a hold of to be watching for that?
Yes, of course. There's lots of information on it, and we'll make sure that you get that. Right, Mike? Staff will make sure that he has access to that
Yeah,
information.
plus the U of M has an AIS seminar coming up on September 23rd.
Mhm.
They'll be discussing the hybrid there the updates on the hybrid. And in fact, we've already had the U of M come out and do sampling on Forest Lake to determine what percent is hybrid on our lake, and it's much higher than we thought it was.
Mhm. Yeah, at one time, Bone Lake had a 52% plant community of hybrid milfoil.
Huh.
Now that's gone down some, from what I understand, but I haven't seen any reports on it. The last report I saw from Steve McComas, Blue Water Science, was a few years ago, and that had the hybrid in bone at that high percentage of all plants. So it was the majority of the plant material.
Okay.
So is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? All those in favor say, oh, I'm sorry, roll call. Roll call. Bobby?
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Oknick,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
I
Manager Loaf.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Motion passes. Mike, you'll be in touch with the president of the association, or staff will?
Yes, and then also just from, just for the minutes, I believe Manager Oknick had already seconded
Okay,
the motion, so we'll just note that.
Yes, you're
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
was that Bobby? Was that Bobby that jumped in?
Yep, I just
Okay.
noted that Mike was correct. Yep.
Yeah, if that happens, just interrupt me, okay? Thank you. Okay, next is the CR 50 iron enhanced sand filter appraisal.
Madam Chair and managers, so not to be outdone by the Northeast Bone Lake Wetland Project, which is being moved forward. The district has another project here on with the iron enhanced sand filter, County Road 50, which is again a Clean Water Fund granted project, and we are pleased that we're moving forward with a project site, and as a part of that, the district has proceeded with obtaining an appraisal, which we would like to discuss with the board in a closed session. So we will need a motion to do so, and needs to be read in accordance with what the motion states. And then we'll stop the recording and then convene into closed session for further discussion on this topic. So we would ask then members of the audience that are not part of the discussion, I think maybe the people that we would want to, obviously, it's the board members and Bobby Law and Blaine Andeker to stay on along with our district engineer. I think for staff, Emily, if you want to depart, that's probably fine at this point.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir. Yes, Chuck.
if I may volunteer a thought, I don't know if the board wants to consider placing this item after the program project updates. For those who may want to be present for that, and then they can sign off, and then the board can have its closed session discussion.
Okay. Does the board agree with that? Any objections to moving that agenda item?
No objection.
No objection.
No
Okay.
objection.
All right, then let's move program and project updates up, and we will discuss that now.
Madam President, managers, Blaine has put together a quick update here, and as we consider methods of providing communications to the new managers, we want to at least start with some of our current projects, but we'll also then maybe on the 30th or a different time when we're at that time when we're in person, maybe get some feedback on information that the new managers would like to have going forward, what format and such. But right now, here's a nice update that Blaine has put together. Thank you, Blaine.
Madam Chair, managers, I just wanted to run through the project updates that I provide periodically, give a little bit more background on a few of the projects, just for some of the newer board members, bring them up to speed on the projects that we're currently working on and a few future projects that we're hopefully being awarded some grant funds. I do put these together every month, so they usually just have updates, current status, but again, wanted to go back through and give a little background. This first slide here, or the cover slide, if you could go back, please, Bobby, just for a second. It's just a picture of the Dahlen Field. This is a field that was identified in one of our diagnostic studies as having quite a bit of runoff, flows into Bone Lake. The district currently rents or leases this property and has put it in a perennial vegetation hay crop to stabilize the soils. We've also been using this area as a spoil site for some of our wetland projects. So the soil has been depleted over years. We've been bringing in some of these wetland soils to restore the soil health and have better plant establishment on this area. The area in the picture is the spoils from the DCB project that was just planted this spring. So as you can see, we've got good plant cover on that particular plot of ground, and got good stability because of the vegetation. The DCB was a wetland project that was done this past winter. It was a small wetland scrape to create some settling areas for one of the tributaries to Bone Lake, and the project is estimated to reduce phosphorus load to Bone Lake by approximately 30 pounds per year. We hope to use this parcel of land also to dispose of the spoils from the northeast Bone Lake wetland as well. So we'd be, again, moving that material to this land, improving soil health, as well as getting rid of those wetland soils. It'll add to the soil character of the area, and then we'll be able to have a better vegetation crop, perennial hay crop that we can potentially even come in and harvest and sell, recoup some of the costs for leasing the property.
And I do want to note just on the soil health piece, I was out last week and walked the property as well for a number of reasons, just kind of checking it out. But you can literally see in this photo even the extent that where this material was deposited that we brought in to improve the soil versus very depleted and degraded soil in the remainder of the field. So if you wanted a primer on what depleted versus non-depleted soil would look like, within a few feet you can see the difference in this field at this time.
Sounds like a good field trip, Mike. That's great.
Next slide, please, Bobby. So this is the Iron Hand sand filter County Road 50 project that we'll be discussing later, the appraisal of the property. So this is located south of Third Lake, Forest Lake Third Lake, in the Judicial Ditch, Washington Judicial Ditch 6 drainage. We have Clean Water Fund grants for this dollars for this project to implement this project. It was identified through our diagnostic monitoring. It identified the WJ86 as a source of phosphorus for Forest Lake. So we've been in contact with landowners and have found a willing landowner to host one of these projects. What we're proposing here is an iron enhanced sand filter. What we'd basically be doing is taking water from the judicial ditch, pumping it up into 2 basins that are filled with the iron enhanced sand. We allow the water then to filter through these sand beds, and the iron filings within the beds adhere to the phosphorus and pull that out of the water column, out of the system. This will then, the water will then be allowed to drain back into the judicial ditch, which in a much cleaner state, and eventually find its way down to Third Lake. We've got 2 basins here because these iron enhanced sand filters need to dry completely to get the exchange of or attach the phosphorus to the iron filings. So we pump into one basin, allow that to dry. While that's draining and drying, we pump into the other basin and go back and forth between as we can to treat as much water as possible. So current status, we have received the appraisal back from the contractor that we had hired, and we will be presenting that to the board for discussion tonight. And then we hope to take that information, the direction we get from the board, to the landowner here in the next week or so, and negotiate a price for the easement and get that finalized. Once that is completed, we'll be able to continue with design, final design, and permitting for the project, with hopes to implement not this winter, but the winter after, the fall and winter after. This is estimated to reduce the phosphorus load to Third Lake by approximately 85 pounds per year. So quite a large chunk.
Mm.
Next slide, please. The next 2 projects that we're talking about are a new grant that we just received this past winter, another Clean Water Fund grant. And this is for the Little Comfort Lake subwatershed. Got 2 wetland projects. The first being the East Wetland, which I'm sure you've heard about. in the past. But essentially, this east wetland is located along Heath Avenue, south of Comfort Lake. Flows from a large wetland complex. We have flow up north to Little Comfort Lake. As identified in the Little Comfort Lake subwatershed analysis and through our diagnostic monitoring, identified this wetland, which is a ditched and modified wetland, as contributing quite a bit of a load, over 100 pounds, I believe, into Little Comfort Lake. We're proposing a project to stabilize soil moisture within that wetland. That'll prevent the wetland from cycling between wet and dry. And what we find is in these modified wetland systems that are ditched, they tend to dry out and then re-wet, and that allows the phosphorus to come out of the soils and be transported downstream into a water body. We're proposing an adjustable weir at the location indicated on the map. That'll allow us to stabilize the groundwater surface, or groundwater levels within the wetland, preventing that drying and wetting cycling, allowing ecological processes to be restored within that area, and that'll help uptake some of the nutrient out of the system there as well, and allow settling within that basin. We've had a wetland delineation completed for the area, the project area, and that has just been submitted to the Wetland Authority, or WACA, LGU, and Army Corps of Engineers for approval. So that should be, it was just sent in today, actually, so the slide's a little bit old, but they'll be coming out and verifying that. And then we've been contacting landowners. We had a virtual open house a month ago. I gave a presentation on the project, what we're hoping to do. That presentation was recorded and then sent out to all the landowners in the area. So if they weren't able to make the meeting, they could come and view the video. And then we'll also be holding a in-person open house on September 16th from 6 to 8. One of the local landowners will be hosting that. Basically, a fairly informal meeting. We'll just be meeting with as many landowners that are willing to come out and take a look, describe the project, answer any questions that we might have, and if time allows and if there's interest, we'd walk down, take a look at the wetland, and kind of just discuss what we're planning on doing, trying to get a little bit more support for the project itself. We do have support from the majority of the landowners in the northern section of the wetland. So if we would need, we could scale the project just to that northern area. But we're hoping to engage, get support from all the landowners and have a full-scale project moving forward.
Blaine, excuse me,
Yes.
is this the drainage that goes into the Heath Avenue culvert
Yes,
and,
Yep, so it's-
and directly into Comfort,
yes.
Little
So,
Comfort, I should say? Mhm.
Yep, so that the proposed weir location, it goes, flows to the west there and then across Heath Avenue and then kind of comes up north along Highway 8 and
Okay.
eventually finds its way to Little Comfort.
And it would be interesting, you probably don't have it right now, but it would be interesting to know how much of the 375 pounds of phosphorus that are exiting that culvert right along Highway 8, that this property is responsible for. Because
We do have those numbers.
Yeah,
I don't have them off the top of my head. I believe it was a bit over 100. And this
Okay.
project is estimated to reduce about 80 pounds per year
all right.
for exiting this wetland.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So a good portion of the total load coming from this area.
Mhm.
Next slide, please.
Just
The
quick
grant that we-
question.
Yes.
Just a quick question, Blaine, kind of shifting gears here. This reminds me of the situation we have similar on Hayward Avenue, the wetland on Hayward Avenue North, which you looked at for cattail harvesting. And I think we also checked the phosphorus flow out of that wetland, but that wetland does dry and wet out, many times during the summer. Not this past summer, it's been dry all summer, obviously. But normally it's 4 or 5 times a summer that will go wet and then dry, wet, dry, wet, dry. Would that be a candidate for the same kind of analysis or not?
It definitely could be. And I know we're doing diagnostic monitoring on that culvert this year. So it'll be interesting to look at those results and kind of try to get an idea. It's been odd year because it has been so dry. But hopefully that sheds a little bit of light on that and we could potentially pursue a project similar to this to stabilize those the soil or the water soil, the the water concentration within the soils of that particular wetland.
How many acres is this versus that Hayward Avenue wetland, would you guess, just based upon what you've seen?
This is a very large wetland complex that actually extends further south than that image actually depicts.
Okay,
Don't know the acreage, but I believe it's hundreds of acres. Interestingly, there's some evidence that it once flowed to the south to Forest Lake. And I believe part of it actually still may do that.
interesting.
Yeah.
Again,
I
it is
didn't know
a
that.
ditch system, so it has been highly
Mhm.
altered.
Yeah. Isn't the vegetation quite a bit different though in this wetland than the Hayward Avenue?
Yes, very much so. There's actually some
Yeah.
nice larch habitat within this wetland complex. It's got some higher elevational areas. So it is fairly dynamic, or at least has a better vegetation component compared to the Hayward Avenue, which is all just monoculture of cattail, hybrid cattail.
So that's an interesting question about flowing it towards Forest Lake, because if you raise the weir and raise the water level, are you going to be forcing water into Forest Lake?
So the survey work that we've done and the subsequent modeling will ensure that we're only inundating an area that we're intending to, and that it still maintains that flow path to the north.
Okay,
But that'll all be looked at
okay, great,
as
thank you.
we go through the design. Next slide, please. So the grant that we did receive covered the project that we just talked about at the Heath Avenue area. This project, which we'll be discussing, which is School Lake, Little Comfort Lake channel enhancement, and then also the alum treatment in Little Comfort Lake. We'd be addressing the external load, which is from these two wetland complexes prior to doing the alum treatment. So get rid of the source and then treat the internal loading. This is another project, wetland complex, a modified wetland complex that's located to the east, southeast of Little Comfort Lake. It's the area between School Lake and Comfort Lake. There's a channel that flows through that area. We refer to it as the School Lake Little Comfort Channel. Doesn't really have a very good name, but essentially we've got a diagnostic monitoring data that indicates water coming out of School Lake is cleaner when it comes out than when it passes through these wetland complexes, and where we monitor to get it at Itasca, thus indicating that these wetlands are a source of nutrient for Little Comfort Lake. So that was all from diagnostic studies with the Little Comfort subwatershed analysis. What we're planning to do here is again stabilize the water elevation or groundwater elevation within these wetland complexes. That'll allow or reduce that wet-dry cycling. It'll also allow the ecosystem to recover a little bit, and it should take some of that nutrient phosphorus out of the water column coming through these wetlands. We also noted when doing surveys in this area that there's 2 to 3 feet of mucky sediment in the bottom of this channel. Every time we get a high flow, that sediment is immobilizing and likely going downstream into Little Comfort Lake. So source of total suspended solids, and we often see nutrients attached to those suspended solids as well. So hoping to stabilize the entire system, get it to function a little bit more like the wetland complex that it naturally was. And with that, have a reduction of around 60 pounds of phosphorus per year down to Little Comfort Lake. Current status, we've been reaching out to both landowners and to permitting agencies. We had a virtual meeting on July 27th. Again, we recorded a presentation for those that weren't able to make it, and handed that out to, or sent it out to all the landowners, hoping that they could jump on at their leisure, view the project, and just get informed about the project. We hope to follow up with all the landowners soon, and I have spoken to several and have received some good input. There's at least a couple of landowners that are very much on board, and one of them being the key landowner for access to the wetland complex. So that's good news. We'll be continuing to reach out to landowners and garner support, and then also continuing to engage the permitting agencies. We've got two kind of thoughts here for stabilizing the water elevation within the wetland. One is a standard engineered design, which would be a rock weir or something of that nature. And then there's also a more natural approach, a cheaper, simpler design, which is they're called beaver dam analogs. Pretty common out west now. And it's exactly what it sounds like. We would go in and try to recreate beaver dams. You have to have a series of them throughout the system because they're pretty weak on their own, but they do work off each other to dissipate flows and deal with the shear stress of a system like this. And what we find is that they provide those ecological services similar to what a beaver dam would, and it also may encourage some colonization by beaver dams within an area like this. It hasn't caught on in the Midwest quite yet. There's still a negative connotation with beaver in this area. So we're working with permitting agencies to see if that would be something that they'd even allow. We've already spoken to them on to the DNR and Army Corps and got some mixed reviews back from them. So we're working through that process to see what they would allow and how we could move forward with the design for this project.
Wayne,
And
I have a
again-
question.
Yes.
Excuse me. I have a question about the sludge that you were talking about, or sediment, whatever's getting into that system. Have you analyzed that to determine whether it is soil or is it byproduct from animals, farm animals?
We haven't collected any samples and had them analyzed.
Mhm.
It seems like, natural kind of mucks and sediments or soil types that you'd find in a wetland environment.
Okay.
My theory is that, this is a modified system through a wetland complex. We've got soils that are coming out, slumping off of the surrounding wetland into the channel as you have flow going down. It's over time drawing sediments or soils from the surrounding wetland into the channel. It's a low gradient system, so they're naturally settling there.
Mhm.
They don't seem like the sediments associated with some of the ag type of operations in the area, though it would be good to verify that. It's a good point.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, please. The next project I would just want to talk about is the Northeast Bone Lake Legacy Load wetland enhancement, which we've already discussed today. So I'll go over this pretty briefly. Again, an ag operation that operated in the 50s and 60s. We've got remnant nutrient manure in the wetland. We verified that with some soil cores. We have a Clean Water Fund grant to go in and remove these sediments, these soils, an estimated 15 to 26 pound per year reduction of load to Bone Lake. It's located again northeast corner of Bone Lake, and we identified this through a combination of aerial photography, discussing or talking to local residents, and then doing some diagnostic monitoring to verify what we thought might be happening here. This project is pretty much shovel ready. All the easements are finalized. We've got all the permitting in place. We just selected the contractor, so we just need to finish the contracting for this, and we will be implementing this project either late this year or early next year as weather permits. We would like a deep freeze before doing any excavation within this wetland. It's just easier for equipment to operate and get into the area without mucking things up too much. Next slide, please. We also have the Sunrise River Drain Wetland Restoration Project, or often referred to as the tax forfeit property. So this is located north of Forest Lake, along the Himes Lake drainage, also along Highway 61. It's a parcel owned by the district. We have a Clean Water Fund grant in place to do restoration on this wetland. What we're proposing to do is to take water from the Himes Lake drainage, which you can see there in the image, kind of the lower third of that image, running right to left, or left to right, excuse me, and that enters into the Sunrise River a few hundred meters downstream. We'll be taking water out of that drainage, getting it up onto that wetland, allowing ecological processes to take some of the nutrient out of the system, sediments, total suspended solids, anything like that would be able to settle out. We'd have clean water coming out of this wetland complex into the Sunrise River, which flows into Comfort Lake. This project is stalled out a little bit. The in order to do this project, we need a little bit of property or easements, access to a bit of the property to the south of the tax forfeit property. We were discussing that with the landowners, and they passed away within the past year. So those discussions were just recently taken back up with heirs to the property. They seem open to allowing us an easement to implement the project as we have conceived it. And then we've also been looking at some additional design elements. If we go to the next page, there is a drainage to the north of this tax forfeit property, which flows into the Himes Lake drainage just upstream of the project area. We could route this directly into the project, and this would be potentially another 40 pounds per year of phosphorus reduction that we could incorporate into the project. So we're evaluating this other element, how we could combine this with the current design or current concept for the wetland restoration and make this a better, more effective project. So the northern drainage is outlined in red there. You see quite a large area, almost 200 acres, and approximately 40 pounds per year that we could reduce that phosphorus load. So we're continuing conversations with the landowner to the south, considering a couple other design elements in this project. And then the Clean Water Fund grants, I believe they expire not this year, but the next year. So we're talks with them about extending that grant period so that we can implement this project after we figure out all these design elements and get all the other ducks in a row for the project. So it has stalled out, but it is gaining traction and moving forward here more recently.
Blaine, is the upper reach of that red area in Himes Lake area? Is that the housing in Himes Lake up in the upper left?
I believe that's accurate.
Okay.
Yeah, it drains to the south though, which is a little different.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So those were the we got one more current project, potential agricultural land project in the Moody Lake drainage. It actually flows directly into and is adjacent to Fourth Lake. So a small project. We were talking to some landowners in regard to some erosion that was noted during some of the diagnostic monitoring. That led us to discover that there was a broken drain tile on this particular property with some associated erosion. We've been in talks with the landowner about the design for a project that would convey some of the water from the drain tile break into a grassed waterway into Fourth Lake, reducing the erosion, stabilizing some of the stream, the lake shore associated with the agricultural area, and then also establishing a buffer along Fourth Lake in the ag field. So we're had a couple different design iterations, and based on the cost effectiveness of the project, we're trying to redesign it again to get a little bit more cost effectiveness from this particular project. It's small. We're only estimating 3 to 5 pounds of phosphorus reduction to Fourth Lake. However, it'd be good to address any erosion that we can, and we do have a willing landowner. So it would be a good project. We're just trying to figure out the best way to do it, the most cost effective way to do it. We were hoping to get something going this fall yet, but due to design changes, it potentially could get pushed to next spring. Next slide, please. So those are all the current projects. We've got a couple, hopefully future projects. We applied for 3 Clean Water Fund grants this past summer. And I'd just like to mention those briefly. One is in the Moody Lake area, one is in the Washington Judicial Ditch 6 area, and then one in the School Lake subwatershed along July Avenue. We've got some willing landowners in all of these potential project areas. And in Moody Lake, we've got a number of smaller projects. We're referring to this as the Moody Lake capstone, because it would be a good chunk of the remaining phosphorus load reduction that would be needed to ensure that Moody Lake stays in the clean water state that we have it right now, or the improved water quality state that we have it right now. A number of smaller projects, a couple of wetland cells, some wetland restoration. We've got two historic ag areas that we have soil core data indicating that we have high loads of legacy manures. Again, one near the Moody Barn area, and then another near an agricultural area to the south of Moody Lake. So again, soil core data indicating that we have high phosphorus levels within those soils above background. So we're proposing to go in and excavate those sediments and restore the wetland in those particular areas. I've got some rain garden type revegetation projects in the Moody Lake Park area. And then just north of that, there's some wetland cells from a drainage from a pond on the west side of Lofton Avenue. So all of those projects rolled into one could potentially have a phosphorus reduction of around 45 pounds per year of phosphorus. Similarly, in WJD6, Washington Judicial Ditch 6, we've got a tributary, a western tributary that was identified through diagnostic monitoring as having relatively high load coming down and entering into WJD6, which then flows into Third Lake of Forest Lake. Got a landowner that we've been in contact with who's open to a project. He's got a couple acres of highly modified wetland. It's basically just a reed canary monoculture, really non-functional wetland. What we like to do is excavate some shallow wetland cells within that area and some deeper areas, and then reroute the tributary, the western tributary of JD6 through that wetland complex, allowing settling of any sediments that might be in the water column, and then also allowing uptake of nutrient with the wetland, shallow wetlands within that area. Water would then come back to the tributary, much cleaner flow into Washington Judicial Ditch 6 and then into Forest Lake. And that's estimated to be approximately 40-pound reduction of phosphorus per year. And again, we do have a willing landowner provided a letter of support for the grant, and we also had several letters of support for the Moody Lake grant as well. Next slide, please. And the last grant that we applied for this past summer was the July Avenue Feedlot project. This is on a tributary to the School Lake, Little Comfort Lake channel, comes in upstream of School Lake. But we've got a large agricultural area and a feedlot pretty much directly on that tributary. We've got runoff from the field, which is in row crops, going right through the feedlot, picking up manures and whatnot as it goes through that feedlot and then enters into the July Avenue tributary. We've got diagnostic monitoring indicating that there's quite a high load coming in through that system. So we've approached the landowner. He seems open to implementing some land management practice changes on his operation that could include some rain gutters. So we're keeping clean water off the surface of the land, routing it directly to the ditch system as opposed to going across the feedlot and picking up manure. Got some buffers along the feedlot that we could put in place that would help filter out some of the sediments moving through. We could potentially move the feedlot a bit away from the tributary and then do some cover crops, which would both stabilize the ag fields and then also provide some grazing opportunity for his cattle. So a number of different practices that we could implement on this particular property, and it's estimated to reduce the load to School Lake by around 90 pounds per year for phosphorus. So quite a large load coming from the system, and with a few land management changes, it could dramatically improve water quality coming out of this area. So these are our three grants that we have, and hopefully find out if we're awarded one or all of them this winter. And at that point, we'd engage with the landowners, get agreements in place, easements, agreements, whatnot, and then work on design and permitting. So we have quite a few projects in the works, and we should get some good phosphorus reduction from all of them. They've all been vetted and are high cost benefit type projects. Any questions?
Very impressive. It's exciting to get this kind of reporting again. You know, we've been so involved with plans, so this in budgeting, this is really, really good. You've been busy. Just one comment I wanted to make on if we don't get the Clean Water Fund grant on these agricultural projects, there is money available through the Ag Department So we should be looking at that as well as a backup.
Will
Yes,
any of
ma'am.
these pertain to the lower St. Croix? If nothing else, we should point out, I counted five projects that were actually have to do with what we call legacy loads. And, we've been accused of, as we made that initial presentation 2 years ago, of being lucky, right? Well, here we got 5 more projects that are like 30 times better than the project they've got going right now. So maybe just pointing these projects out to the group, saying that they're out there, you just got to walk the fields, and open your nose up and smell where they are, basically.
Yeah.
So I think it's such a great opportunity. You have done great work here finding these legacy loads.
Mm-hmm. I think the other thing we can do also is apply to the Lower St. Croix group for funding.
So they see the opportunities.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And the data behind
Right,
everything.
right, right. That's the best way to educate.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Show them the way. Well, staff's been very busy. This is very exciting. We've got a lot of things going in almost every district, lake management district, and that's good for the public. So thank you for the hard work. This is great.
Yeah, this will be helpful to our new board members too, I'm sure, to get
Mhm.
a feel for what kind of work we're talking about here. So great
Absolutely.
job for the whole team that worked on this. Yeah.
Madam Chair, managers, make a quick comment on this.
Certainly. Go ahead.
As you can see, it's an impressive amount of work that I think Blaine did an excellent job in summarizing everything that is going on. And, this type of presentation, the idea is to do it every month. So it would be a good reminder of everything that's going on. I guess from our perspective, your perspective, the question would be, there are a number of big projects that have been done already. Would it make sense to have us maybe presenting on those projects even more in detail, perhaps, 10-15-minute presentation to kind of remind the managers of what it was, but also for the benefit of the new managers? If this
I
is
think
something,
so.
okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's important. And if we don't have room to do it on a meeting agenda, I think that we should have a workshop where we are introducing, we've got 3 new managers, so we need to immerse them in the information about where we've come from, what projects we've done, our approach. I think that's a great idea. I really do. So anybody else? Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree. We just should wait for Jen's replacement to be on board, obviously.
Mhm. Yep. Which I understand is already happening or happened and will be with us at our next meeting in September.
And things slow down a little bit towards the end of the year, so that might be a good time to do it. So.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, very good. Thank you so much. That was exciting.
May I ask one question before this
Of course.
discussion? Would you like to see this level of detail at each once a month at a board meeting, or are the slides that I present with kind of current updates sufficient?
I think
would
this-
see. Go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, I think the slides with updates, and you be the judge of if you need to go beyond that, but keeping us, we're kind of used to having those kind of project and program updates on a routine basis, but we just haven't had time in the agendas to really focus on it with all of the 10-year planning and the Lower St. Croix planning and all of that, but we need to get back into that. So I would say that type of an update monthly would be helpful. Any new project would have to have this kind of detail, though.
Okay.
I'm not sure we have to do all of them at every meeting. Maybe you pick out 2 that you think have made the most progress, or I guess the thing that's most of interest to us is mainly what are the roadblocks or the next steps that have to be taken to keep it moving ahead. So is there something that's really going to be an issue for us that maybe the board could help with or something like that? So I think you have to make a judgment on if it hasn't changed much, or maybe do 2 or 3 a meeting would be fine. We did a lot tonight, almost all of them, I guess. So
Well,
that'd be a
that
lot to handle every meeting, I think.
Well, I think it's I mean, they're all professionals here, and I think they can gauge the time, but it's like our engineering report. To me, this is just a little bit more detailed than that, but that's the whole point of the engineering report, is to keep us abreast of what's happening and problems and so on. So I think we can accommodate what we need to and keep it within a 15-20 minute presentation kind of a thing, okay? It's too important. I mean, this is the work that we started the district to do. So we need to be updated. The managers all need to know what's going on. So if they get asked by the public, they can speak with some confidence. Well, very good.
As one of the new managers, there's an enormous amount of information to absorb, and the learning curve is very steep, but there's so much good information in these reports that I spent all day just reading and trying to dig into the plan, the 10-year plan, and it's impressive all the way around. And but there's some issues that require a little more detail and just helping fill out the context to better understand it. And I think some of these in-depth dives into some of these projects would be very helpful all the way around.
Okay, sounds
Thank you.
good. Thank you.
I'll work with staff on maybe putting together a list. Manager Smaltz, you mentioned, you wanted this more historical project summary, maybe for the budget piece. Typically the presentation later at the end of the year, we probably won't go in that kind of detail. We could add a few slides now, but it would be a pretty healthy list. And what we could do is pick through a variety of those to get into some summary fashion in terms of a presentation for the new board members, but also then again, just telling our story. It'll be a part of our minutes, and then anybody that happens to watch our meeting at a later time would be able to see it then too, because these are recorded. And the other is, one for the County Road 50 project, that iron hand sand filter. The district now has a pretty substantial amount of experience in these specialized types of projects. So much so that the St. Anthony Falls Laboratory at the University of Minnesota has, in more recent years, reached out to us to collect additional information. And I've been part of a work group with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency on these same types of projects. So this is not a new type of project for the district, but one that we have in multiple locations already with the engineering support from EOR. So I think that would be important for new board members that may not be as familiar with these types of projects. So
I think that's true. I think having the staff that we have now allows us to do more than we did in the past, at any given time, and to also then be looking for those opportunities, because sometimes you don't know until you start another project, or you get in, you dive into an area, and then all of a sudden you're finding legacy loads that you didn't know about, and so on, like the one on Bone Lake right now. So we're able to respond to that opportunity because we've got enhanced staff. So I think it's just a sign of the aging of the district as well. It's a very exciting time. All right. Well, any other comments? Okay. Thank you very much, staff and everyone. That was excellent. We're going to move back then to item 5D, the iron enhanced sand filter appraisal.
Madam President, I think council can guide the board to moving into closed session. And I think presently everyone that currently remains on the meeting video Zoom call here would be, unless I'm not seeing somebody else, but I I think it's all staff and managers.
And
Madam
our engineers as well, is that correct? Or not?
Yes, I often consider
Mhm.
our engineer as part of the staff council.
Okay,
Madam Chair.
yes, Mr. Holden.
Everybody who's who's still in the meeting can participate in the closed session. That would be fine. And if you wish to move into closed session, I'd suggest a motion to do so in order to develop an offer on an easement on property located at 20180 Jeffrey Avenue North.
Okay. There's a proposed motion on the memo for this item. And I will just get this started by making the motion to convene in closed session to develop an offer for an easement on the CR50 IESF parcel, PID number 23.032.21.44.0002.
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call, please.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Lowe.
He may not be back.
Looks like he's here.
Okay,
Can you hear me?
now we can hear you.
Manager Lowe,
Aye.
thank you.
Okay, the board is reconvening an open session. And before us is a motion to proceed with the easement purchase and to authorize staff to move forward with contacting the landowner and to offer the appraisal and use the appraisal amount as the district's position. And this is for an easement on CR50 IESF parcel PID 23.032.21.44.0002.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
may I suggest first a motion to authorize staff to share the appraisal with the landowner?
certainly. I was just doing a preamble there. Is there a motion from staff to share the appraisal?
I'll make that motion to share the appraisal with the client.
Okay, is there a second?
I will second that.
Any further discussion? Bobby, a roll call, please.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Lowe.
Aye.
Motion is passed. And now, guide us through this, Chuck. We need a motion to,
I'd suggest a motion authorizing the administrator to execute an easement with the landowner in the form provided with the appraisal and in the appraised amount.
okay, we'll take that wording and who wants to make that motion?
I so move.
Who wants to second? I'll second. Any further discussion? Although, roll call, please.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Taves,
Aye.
Manager Lowe.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes. Is there anything else that we need to do, Chuck?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we are finished with that item. Next item is summary and approval of board direction. I don't believe there was any. So unless you had something, Chuck.
Well, I did write it, I did write a couple of things down.
Mhm.
In the budget levy consideration, that staff will put in projected estimated market value and net tax capacity figures for 2022 and sent to the work group, and otherwise consult with Manager Anderson about certain corrections.
I would ask to move that off or to remove that. During the discussion, I realized what had happened. And it's just a matter of shifting the numbers down. They're not in alignment. The levy is always based on the year prior. So that solves the problem. So I would take that off of that. I told Emily I would contact her. It'll take 5 seconds to correct.
Okay.
All right, anything else?
Also, that staff prepare a chart of the district's projects completed, reductions from each by lake management district in chronological order, in case that became useful. Also, I have a request for staff to provide information on hybrid Eurasian water milfoil to Manager Taves and perhaps to everyone. And then just the items relating to the project review, to include a presentation of past projects for the benefit of new managers in a workshop format, and then just to provide monthly 15 to 20-minute updates with a focus on roadblocks and next steps.
Okay, very good. Anything anybody feels is missing? No, then a motion to adjourn is in order.
I'll move that we
Madam Chair,
adjourn.
just a quick, could I just give
Sure.
the board update just quickly, very quickly? I just wanted to give you the heads up that as part of the regular update and upgrade of our website, we are thinking about featuring the Forest Hill Golf Course project in terms of harvest and reuse. And just wanted to mention that the way we're planning on doing it would be a combination of drone shots, maybe a still photography, paid videography, and also potentially doing some interviews of the district staff and or board staff and golf course staff. So it's something that potentially is going to be about 5 minutes, and we are going to be doing the same thing with other 2 projects. And just wanted to give you the heads up that we're planning on doing that. We'll keep you informed.
Very good, thank you.
Great, thanks, Cecilia.
We'll get a copy of that, of course, right? Okay, is there anything else? A motion to adjourn is in order. I'll move to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Nobody wants to leave.
Nobody
Okay.
wants to leave, especially the new managers. They're just entranced.
Roll call, roll call.
Manager Anderson,
Aye.
Manager Schmaltz,
Aye.
Manager Taves, Manager Lowe.
Aye.
Good meeting, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night, thanks.